morning to everyone. Hello and welcome to this first of our EPRA Media and Information Literacy Task Force roundtable sessions. And that's the last time I will say that particular title. It's a bit of a mouthful. For those who don't know me, my name is Donde, and I am a member of the EPRA board. And I'm here today just to give you a brief introduction to today's session, introduce our moderator, and provide a little bit of context for what we're doing here today. As you may or may not know, the EPRA network has been doing a huge amount of work on media literacy over the past few years now, from running concrete sessions and parts of our work programme, producing outputs such as guidance and sharing best practice on tips of a variety of activities around media literacy for regulators, and all the way through to building a more informal but growing MIL task force of regulators focusing on media literacy issues. The aim of this task force, which I've been lucky enough to be involved in from the very beginning, has been to provide a more regular and constant route for discussions, sharing best practice, and learning from other members' expertise in these areas. Two things have become very clear to me during my time, both on the board and as a member of the task force. The first is that there is ever-growing activity among media regulators and EPRA members specifically in the area of media literacy, and the momentum around the creation and coordination of media literacy networks is definitely a key part of that, if not really the key part of that. And the second is that there are a number of other bodies in Europe, and indeed around the world, that do similar types of work, particularly around that kind of building of partnerships, coordination and collaboration in the field of media literacy. And I think those networks, those bodies, have a lot to teach us, EPRA members. And I'm really delighted to say that many of them who have been invited have joined us here today. We have a number of participants who are not members of EPRA, but who are extremely welcome. And I'm really delighted that you were able to join today. From Kaavi in Finland, Mediawijs in Belgium, and the CSAM in Belgium as well, from the Deutsche Welle Academy, from Nordicom, Media and Learning Association, EAVI, and the very newly formed European Digital Media Observatory as well. And of course, a very warm welcome to our long-term partners from the European Audiovisual Observatory and the Council of Europe. We hope very much to build on these meetings that we're having throughout the autumn to bring these organisations into closer contact with our own task force within EPRA, and potentially even as informal members in the future. We've experienced 6 months of the upsides and downsides of the COVID period, and I'm talking here, of course, professionally. I very much hope that everyone has remained well and their families have remained well on a personal level. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to speak to EPRA members, so very much sending my best wishes to everyone. But one at least professionally positive aspect for me has been the ability to run more virtual meetings outside of the scope of our usual programme and welcome in important interlocutors into our EPRA family. I see a real possibility for us to continue to build closer relationships between EPRA and other organisations, particularly through this MIL task force, which really has been the driving force behind these sets of meetings and the coming roundtables on networks that I hope you will all continue to be able to participate in. Very briefly, just in terms of practical aspects, and to introduce today's session and our moderator, and let you know how you can get involved. We've got just over an hour, and most of this session will be moderated by Martina Chapman, who I hope I'm sure is extremely well known to all of you now. Martina has been a close collaborator and friend of EPRA, and indeed of me, for many, many years now. Martina is a extremely well-known consultant, teacher, mentor, and an expert in media literacy matters. And we are extremely fortunate to have our partnership with her. And I'm really, really grateful for her to being really the driving force behind these roundtables. She will introduce our keynote speaker and the panelists that she will be then discussing the sort of early stages of setting up networks with. Please note that this session will be recorded and then made available on the EPRA website. We are very, very much keen to get interaction and any comments and questions from all of you participating. If you can please either write your question or ask for the floor in the chat section of this WebEx conference. I will then sort of collect and call upon you or read out your questions after Martina has had a chance to talk to our main participants today. Please remember to turn off your camera unless you're invited to speak, and of course to mute. And I think that's all of the practical instructions that I have, but I'm sure Emmanuel or Geraldine will interrupt me if I've missed something. We will, as I said, we will open for questions and discussion towards the second half of this session, and towards the end we will summarize today's session and discuss the forthcoming roundtables, which are coming in the next few weeks as well, which we hope you'll also be able to participate in. I'm going to hand over to Martina now. I'll be back with you a bit later on, but really looking forward to hearing from everyone here today, and thank you so much for all of you for joining. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome and your very kind words. I'm blushing here. I'm delighted as well to see so many participants joining us. I've been very fortunate to work with the EPRA kind of task force on mail over the last couple of years probably now, and I think at some of our earlier meetings we started with about 12, so it's amazing to see so many participants in this morning. So everybody's very welcome, and because everybody joined so promptly, we're very well on time, which is excellent. The format today is going to be quite informal, so we're going to have less of a keynote speech and more of a kind of a conversation maybe with Andy, and then we're going to have three other kind of main contributors who will talk about their experience. When we first talked about having these roundtables on the topic of developing neural networks, the scope was so huge. How do we arrange this? And we thought maybe the easiest way to do this would be to theme it. So the theme for this morning's session will be about the very first step. It's kind of the setting up of networks. So this will be hopefully of particular interest to those of you who are at the early stages of developing networks, or just thinking about it, or maybe a couple of steps down that road and you're thinking, okay, well, where do we go from here? And as Maria said, there will be lots of opportunity for discussion, questions and comments towards the end as well. So we're hoping it will be quite an interactive session. So I'm going to introduce Andy Demeulenaere now, first of all. Andy heads the team of Mediawijs, the Flemish Knowledge Centre on Digital and Media Literacy, and he's been doing that since 2015. We're delighted to have Andy with us this morning to share his wealth of knowledge with us. Mediawijs was started on the initiative of the Flemish Minister for Media, and it helps the citizens of the Flemish community in Flanders and Brussels to use digital technology and media actively, creatively, consciously and critically to participate in society. So Andy, are you there? How are you? Good morning.
I'm fine. Hi.
Great stuff. Can we do? There we go. Andy as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Andy. So your role involves coordinating the Mediawijs network. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. I'm the coordinator of the team, which also means that we coordinate our network. I coordinate the people who are also coordinating the network.
Can you tell me a little bit about the network initially? How it came to be? Where did it originate from?
Well, the origins of the network, I think it's a bit specific for our region. It's a bit comparable also to the Netherlands, I think, who were just a few years before us. And in that way, I'm sometimes a bit abashed to be in the company of people who've been doing it for much longer than me, like Patrick or people who have been doing a very large exercise, like Stephanie in Ireland in the last few years. But what happened in Flanders, I think it specifically, is that we don't have a big tradition of media education compared to the regions that are surrounding us, like France or England or the French-speaking part of Belgium. There were some initiatives. There was an action called Newspapers in the Classroom, where the government tried to support the newspaper companies and to get young people to keep reading newspapers. There was a lot of there was some discussion on cultural or arts education, where there were some reports commissioned by the Ministry of Education that said there's not enough media education in it, and not in the formal education, but not in informal education either. And there was also a few organizations working specifically on children's movies, children's films, on producing and distributing European quality children's movies or film festivals, or using movies in education. I think that those were the main things that were really on media literacy. And then there was digitalization. The internet was kind of was adopted widely, as we all know, and it had a very big impact on all kinds of things, but also on the concept of media literacy, or the fact that in Flanders there was a policy kind of started on it. So there were big discussions in four major fields, fields that had to do with media literacy. One was everything on digital information, where there were big discussions on youth information and counseling. Can you do it online? Should there be user-generated content? Can young people counsel each other? Or should there even be information services because they can find everything online and stuff like that?
And
I think there was, yeah.
And in terms of the vision for the network, is that something that you was already in place when the network started to develop or be established, or was the vision of the network something that kind of evolved?
It has evolved.
What is the vision of the network as well? Can you take us through?
Well, if we take to that, I think it's important to know that besides the information field, you also had the digital inclusion field that was starting to become a bit of a network, a bottom-up network of projects that were also not very structurally funded, but try to introduce the concept of digital literacy and digital inclusion. There was also a field specifically on working with young people to produce more media and news. And there was also a field that was basically working mostly on digital online risks. And these four fields kind of came together in what was media literacy in Flanders. It started then specifically with a resolution in Parliament where there was support from our Flemish Parliament for the gaming sector, that wasn't very big and was seen as something for the future, an economic sector for the future, but then also was combined with a few worries about violence, games producing violence, and to counteract the possibility of that, the Parliament said we need a knowledge center to gather information on that and to inform the public on that. We can't just support industry. So that was the start. The next minister organized a call on to start a media literacy knowledge center, and it was introduced in a concept paper by the Minister of Media and the Minister of Education together. They made a definition of what is media literacy here. They really just copied the definition that was used by the Council for Culture in the Netherlands, but it was a good definition. And then they listed all sorts of actions that they were going to do in the years to come, which also implied that there was a kind of vision on this knowledge center should mainly focus on creating a network to and supporting intermediaries and other organizations in stimulating media literacy in Flanders. Now that's interesting because we're on our third minister by now, and we've seen a gradual shift from supporting other organizations and networking and focusing on gathering information towards actually reaching the public. The political climate, the minister could only continue the funding of the network if it really could show its impact in the public, with the public. So that was something. And then also on the vision, it's I think it's because of the origin with these 4 fields. It's also we have a quite wide definition and a wide competence model for media literacy. We really stress the fact that we use media and digital technology for informing, for interacting, for entertaining yourself and others, for creating stuff, but also for fending for a cause or defending yourself against risks. So for us, it's the whole scope of that. That also means that we have 2 competence clusters, one with using media and one with understanding media. And using media, it's from really digital inclusion and button knowledge to actually producing all kinds of things, but that can be audiovisual media, it can be news, but it can also be coding, or it can also be making stuff in a digital makerspace. It's very wide there. And in the understanding thing, it's about observing what media does, about analyzing what the consequences are, about evaluating the positive or negative value of these consequences, and about reflecting on your own behavior on society and what needs to change with it. So for us, media literacy is also very wide. It spans across a whole wide sector. I think that was already in the core of what those 2 ministers put in their media, in their concept note, because also there was a lot of interaction with the Ministry of Education and the Minister of Media, between them and those several fields that were already starting to establish themselves more. So I think that's
it's a very interesting point you made, that that there seems to have been a shift to the need to show that you're having an impact on the public. How can you talk to us a little bit about what that kind of looks like, what that shift looks like?
Yeah, I think if in the first 2 years our assignment was really stressed that we were there to facilitate others to stimulate media literacy more. So that means that we concentrated on forming networks, on getting partners activated. We also, in the first 5 years, we kept 20% of our budget aside to be able to launch calls for cooperation or calls for small projects, so the field could, just experiment and start was stimulated even more. There was also a stress on trying to bring industry and the other sides, so academics, educational, and some more social organizations together to work together for it. So that was quite stressed at that time. But then I think more and more there was our center was started with a call that was answered by 13 separate organizations that worked together. Half of them were academic research groups, and half were social and educational organizations. They were together. Some of them detached some staff part-time into a central hub, and others worked on concrete projects. But then after 2 years, it was kind of clear that working with a hub, a central unit of staff from different organizations, that is very difficult. That it's difficult to get everybody on one line, to see the balance between working for your own organization and working for the central hub and stuff like that. So the central staff was put in one host organization, and the minister made an agreement with that organization to continue the work. So in that way, the network was a bit loosened there, the start of the network, the partners working together. The other thing is that then the minister also assigned a steering committee with the Ministry of Media, the Ministry of Education, the public broadcaster, representatives of academics, representatives of media industry, and representatives of the social and educational sectors, and an international specialist on media literacy, which is Mary from Mediawijs in the Netherlands, to kind of guide us in what we are doing. So that's a second part of the network. In the steering committee, that we have these sectors that kind of try to reflect on what we are doing. And then we also try to set up, to get the sector more involved. We started experimenting with different kinds of networks. So we had a general media literacy platform. Then we tried to organize platforms, and this was kind of meetings and discussions and interaction according to the sectors. What we saw there quite soon was that it was very easy to get social and educational sectors together, because they were used to just coming to meetings and just talking to each other and trying to collaborate. But it was much more difficult to get academic sectors and industry people together in meetings to exchange on good practices and stuff, because they were always looking for what can I get out of this very quickly, and not to invest too much time. So we really have been looking for how can we get people together in networks that in ways that appeal to them. And so we did that. We did the matchmaking sessions. We have big events like, and you keep on seeing that in the traditional social work kinds of networking, you get mostly that sector. So we've I think in the last few years we found a way on focusing on very specific topics. First, we had some expert groups where we brought once a year we brought people together from different sectors on one topic, and now we also have these forums where we not only where we can bring them together, where we have some presentations, and then we have networking specifically. Like last year, we started with the Disin Forum, specifically on disinformation, where we bring people from education, from fact-checking, from journalism, and from academia who are interested in doing projects on that topic together once a year. And we're organizing the same in a few months about gaming with gamer developments, game developers, I mean, and academics and educational people again there. So it's
that's probably a challenge that a lot of networks find. It's about the need for collaboration and the need for bringing a cross-sector group together, but sometimes they don't make natural kind of partners. So I think that's very useful advice in terms of trying to focus down on specific topics and making it very relevant. I'm just conscious of time, and if you had, you know, what based on your experience, what would be your one key piece of advice for anybody starting off on this journey of developing a mill network?
Yeah, I'm going to be very naughty here, and I'm going to give you two pieces of advice. One is very, very succinct, and that's really think about how you can achieve impact. And I mean, it's especially if you're called a knowledge center like we are, it's very enticing to start thinking about what kinds of research could we do and policy documents and make a lot of things that aren't necessarily going to be used, but are interesting for the people working on it. So I think the main thing there is that you really need to think, how are we going to change something with people in everyday life? How are we going to reach that impact? That should be your core business there. And on the other thing is really think about what kind of network you want to be. Like we were first a network of partner organizations, then with the stress on getting these organizations together and supporting them. But then getting more and more focus on actually producing campaigns and reaching certain targets and getting into the press and getting this assignment from our minister more and more. It kind of shifts the balance from being a network to being a more of an organization yourself. And then you come into a conflict of what are we doing and what are our partners or our network doing. Another thing is how large can this network be so that everybody feels that they get enough attention and respect and can cooperate, but that everybody can also join who wants to join. And the larger the network starts to become, the question then is, what is the point where it waters down too much? Yeah. And also, are you prepared that everybody who is in that network or is a member of the network can use that as a sort of quality label? I am part of that network. You can put it on your website and just say, that's so I'm really doing good stuff on media literacy. But if there is no requirement on how you work on media literacy to be part of that network, then that's a bit of a deceptive quality label there.
That's so, a very good concept. Yeah, they're excellent points, and thank you very much for that. I think what we're going to hold on to questions. I'm sure people have lots of questions for you, but what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to the question, and we're going to go to some of our other participants, contributors now. So thank you very much, Andy. That was excellent. Really enjoyed that, and as somebody who's been involved in developing networks, yes, I would agree with everything you said. And it's a process of learning and evolution, I think, a lot of the time. So I think next we'll go to Martina Wagner. Martina is the senior advisor in the Swedish Media Council, and she's leading the council's work with on enhancing media and information literacy in Sweden through national cooperation. And Martina will talk to us about how MIL Sweden network was established. Are you there, Martina?
Yes. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Martina. And hello, everybody. I will tell you a bit about how where we are in Sweden right now, and I will start off with talking about the background, and then a few minutes about the current situation, and finally I will give you my top tips. It all started off in 2018. The government assigned the Swedish Media Council to develop forms for cooperation between stakeholders on media and information literacy. And this was the starting point for the formation of our network. So during 2019, the Swedish Media Council conducted consultations with more than 20 stakeholders in order to identify their needs in relation to their existent work with media and information literacy. And the needs expressed in these consultations were rather consistent. The majority of these actors wanted to be a part of a larger context. They wanted a common goal picture, the possibility to share knowledge and methods to further develop their own work, They wanted to jointly clarify concept and definitions, and increased knowledge of other actors and what efforts were being made to avoid overlaps. So based on these stakeholder consultations, we proposed a structure for the work for enhancing media and information literacy in Sweden. And the structure that we proposed was or is rooted in 3 pillars: the national stakeholder network, 1, 2, platform for sharing knowledge, experience and resources, and a recurrent mapping, a survey mapping media and information literacy. And this is also this became what we were commissioned to do by the government in 2019. And the Swedish Media Council is placed right in the middle of this, being a national coordinator for media and information literacy. And the current situation then is this 2020 is our year of construction. We have established a network with 21 members. There are members from the public sector and non-profit organizations. They are the most relevant actors: public authorities and government agencies, national non-profit organizations, and public service broadcasters. The network is run by a temporary steering group chaired by the Swedish Media Council, and work and activities in the network is run by involvement of the members in different working groups. And obviously this first year, activities mainly are concentrated by building the network. And the membership, by agreeing to the membership guidelines, the members of MIL Sweden are expected to contribute to the knowledge platform by sharing relevant knowledge, skills, and experiences, add information within their areas to the survey mapping media and information literacy, and to communicate information to and from the network in their channels, and to represent their organization during network meetings, which are said to be twice a year. So this is where we are now, and we're looking forward to 2021 when we have the structure fully built. And if I may say some top tips, even though we are just in the beginning, by intertwining these 3 pillars with network mapping and a digital and a physical platform for knowledge, I think we do get a solid long-term structure for this work if we do it in these 3 different pillars. By gathering the most relevant stakeholders in this network around a common ground, and the common ground is created by this annual or biannual mapping, we will all get the possibility to channelize our work. We can coordinate actors from this commonly shared picture and thereby get greater effects from our efforts in the benefit of all citizens and different target groups in Sweden. But I will have to get back on this when we have been working for a bit longer time. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. That was excellent. A really good summary of all that you have achieved in a very short period of time. I think it's a really interesting approach to have the network aspect, the mapping aspect, and I think that is a great place to start, because it's almost like you're setting a baseline right from the very beginning. So thank you very much, Martina. And again, if you've got questions, please do use the comments section there on the side, and Maria will go through the questions as we go on. We can have more of a conversation around all of this. So next up is Leah. Leah Cengic she's the head of the recently established Department for Content and Media Literacy. with the Communications Regulatory Agency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In addition, she's also an expert in her own right in this area, and she's been an active MIL researcher since 2009. In 2012, she published her first book on MIL, which, among other things, analysed media education, MIL policy, MIL activities of NGOs and the media industry, and media accessibility. This mapping, of course, I'm sure was extremely helpful when it came to setting up the MIL network. And Leah is going to talk to us in a bit more detail about that now. Very welcome, Leah.
Thank you, Martina, for the introduction and the opportunity to present our network, which is, I guess, the youngest one in this group. Our experience might be of use for those who are considering establishing a network, because I will explain briefly our first steps towards creation of a network and the challenge that way. I think it's also important to say something about our background, because there is surely no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to a creation of a MIL network.
We're having some difficulty there just with the connection. I wonder if you turn off the video, it might help the bandwidth a little bit.
Okay, yes, I will try. So do you hear me now better? Or
yes, I think that's a bit
okay.
better, yeah.
So we were the first state institution to use this term in 2010. We produced a document on media literacy and published it on our webpage. We heard something about different ministries and other countries that presented their experiences, but in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's quite complicated. We have, for example, 14 ministries for this small country who are in charge of education. We have several ministries for a small country of 3.5 million citizens in charge of communication. So it's quite difficult to have all those ministries involved in this area. And there is, for this reason, also no institution which has a clear mandate to improve MIL. The biggest problems or biggest gaps we have in the field of education, there is also a lack of media pedagogy and no MIL curriculum yet. And also for the NGOs and international donors, this topic became interesting just maybe 5 years ago. As I said, CRA became involved in 2009. And it was after the Reykjavik meeting of EPRA where this issue of media literacy has been tackled. And our activities from 2009 to 2020 were sporadic. They were mainly focused on protection of minors in audiovisual media services and online safety, because we are also a convergent regulator. But in these past 10 years, we cooperated with numerous stakeholders, such as UNICEF, Save the Children, Microsoft, other tech companies, Council of Europe, etc. In October 2020, Department for Content and Media Literacy was created, and we are now 3 people working in this department. One of our first goals was, of course, to set up a MIL network. The first steps was mapping the stakeholders and their activities. And as you said, we had this in-house knowledge already. We were very much involved in it and knew the partners, the potential stakeholders, and knew a lot about their activities. But there were also some stakeholders that we didn't know about, and it was quite a process learning about different partners and their recent activities. After that, we created a database of MIL stakeholders and had meetings, communications with other 2 big stakeholders aimed at including previous initiatives of networking, so that we have just one single network. Our first meeting was in December 2019, and we had an excellent response. 32 institutions and organizations from different parts of the country participated in our first meeting. We had ministries, we had people from educational sector, librarians, teachers, filmmakers, organizations dealing with protection of children and online safety, fact checkers, but also international players in this field, like delegation of the EU to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Council of Europe, UNESCO, etc. At this first meeting, we offered to our participants the opportunity to present their recent activities and their plans for 2020. And we presented the idea of an informal network and gave all participants also some ideas, or discussed with them ideas for possible future cooperation. So we agreed upon starting a campaign called Mill Week or Mill Days. It maybe doesn't sound like a huge work, but it really was, because there were many participants. You have to know them, you have to know the activities that they have, you have to structure the discussion. There are many different mill topics, but you also have to prepare the document on the idea of the network, the proposal how the network should operate. You have to propose the idea of joint activities, etc. And of course, to make minutes and distribute to have the communication all the time. We were really well prepared and had the advantage to know a lot in advance about our stakeholders, but there were also some challenges that we faced. Mill was clearly deemed important for our agency since we had this department, but at the same time we had no available financial resources for financing of these activities. The meeting took place in our meeting room. We actually didn't expect that many participants, but that was not a good idea. Not only that it was too crowded in that meeting room, it didn't give us the space and time for informal talks, no coffee breaks, no lunch together, which is, I think, very important for networking. It's not only about a long meeting, intense meeting with 32 participants, but it's also very important to have the opportunity to have time just for the participants to meet and to discuss also some possible cooperation together. Our second meeting was organized in cooperation with other two stakeholders. One of them covered the cost for a meeting room in a hotel this time and the lunch for 50 participants this time. And in the meantime, we prepared the communication channels and other materials, had meetings with single stakeholders, and also searched for financial support for joint activities. On the agenda were inter alia presentation of EPRA's guidelines for middle networks, proposal for operation of our network, creation of a public database of mill experts, planning of mill days in March 2020, and launching of a Facebook page mill. Again, there were some positive aspects like good energy, willingness to cooperate, but also some negative. We also realized that there were some partly conflicting interests. Some NGOs were, for example, competing for the same funds, or also some political maybe problems, different institutions from different levels. Lack of funds for joint projects and lack of experience in some fields of cooperation, for example, with social media communication. Previously, we didn't we do not have a big department for social media here within our agency, so we were not able to create visuals on our own, infographics, etc. So it was a part where we had to learn. And then, of course, came COVID. We had to cancel all 9 events planned across the country last minute, and we continued cooperating via email and managed even to produce during this pandemic some materials related to mill and COVID. And we also managed to launch this Facebook page and to have daily posts with resources produced by ourselves, our stakeholders, and other important international institutions in this field. Our next step will be a joint celebration of UNESCO's Mill Week and launching of a specially dedicated webpage to these issues. And I have to also say at the end that we also did have a support internally in our agency from my bosses and from the team, but also from, for example, our PR department, but also from other stakeholders who recognize the importance of what we were doing. For example, the delegation of EU to Bosnia and Herzegovina agreed to support us for this project, Mill Days in Bosnia and Herzegovina. A PR agency working for UNICEF, which is a partner of ours, offered us pro bono help with launching of our Facebook page. So our experience might be useful for someone who is lacking maybe financial resources and who is really at the beginning. And I think with human resources, you really can achieve a lot. Mutual respect among partners is, from my perspective, really crucial.
Leah, that was an excellent summary. Again, you've achieved an awful lot in a very small period of time. So congratulations on that. And I think the point you made about the importance of that human interaction and creating the opportunity in the space for relationship building is really important. It's crucial. That's where, you know, organizations and individuals get to come forward and volunteer, if you like, or come up with ideas. That's where the creativity happens. So thank you very much for that. Last but certainly not least, we have Natia Kukuladze from Georgia. Natia is the head of the Media Literacy Development Department of the Georgian National Communications Commission. And this was set up at the end of 2018 to develop and promote MIL within the Georgian society, following some legislative changes the previous year. Since then, I know several MIL projects have been developed, and but one of the most important issues that the department has been working on is to build a networking system among all of the stakeholders. So I'm going to hand it over now to Natia, who's going to take us through that process. Natia.
Thank you, Martina. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be part of this roundtable and discuss all the MIL issues that Georgian National Communications Commission is working on. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to start with a very brief introduction, how we started and where we are now. And also, I will share with you our experience in building strong networking system in terms of media literacy in our country. At the end of 2017, Communications Commission has been ascribed the function of developing and promoting media literacy as a result of the legislative changes adopted by Parliament. Media Literacy Development Department was set up at the end of 2018, which is responsible for development and promotion of MIL within the Georgian society. Media Academy was also set up in 2018, and its components are Media School, Media Lab, and Media Critics. Communications Commission has created media literacy strategy and action plan alongside with British expert Martina Chapman. Thank you, Martina, for this great input, and it has been presented to the Georgian non-governmental and media sector. It was introduced for their comments and their inclusion into the process. This was the first step from ComCom made for creating a networking system in the country. And also, I would like to say a few words about our partnership with different international organizations. Communications Commission has been in active consultations with Bavarian Regulatory Authority for New Media, BLM, for the purpose of sharing the best practice standards set by BLM over the course of the last 20 years in the field of media literacy. We have very close partnership with BLM, and model of the structure implemented by ComCom has been created according to BLM structure. So Communications Commission has made very strong partnership with various international organizations during this period, and we always share their expertise that has already made success in European countries, as they have, we think, more experience in MIL development. Through active partnership with the Ministry of Education of Georgia, media literacy projects have been accomplished during 2019 that aim to enhance critical important skills among children, adolescents, and other target groups. With this aim, 5 projects were executed in 2019, which have been selected after studying the best European EU practices, evaluating their effectiveness and compatibility with Georgian realities. And we have new ongoing projects as well as new partnerships during 2020, besides the situation we all have, COVID-19, unfortunately. One of the most important projects that Media Literacy Development Department has been working on since 2009 is to build networking system among all the stakeholders that work on media literacy in the country. One of the steps that ComCom has undertaken is creation of online platform of national importance, we call it so. It's the title of the project, and it unites all media literacy related issues, and it is aimed at different target groups. With the support of Council of Europe, working on the platform has been recently accomplished, and it will become public in about a month. The platform definitely is of national importance, as I mentioned, because it's a united online platform that integrates all the information related to the MIL in Georgia. So it includes translations of various studying resources, international literature on media literacy for all the stakeholders, pupils, students, parents, teachers, etc. And the most important is that there is a specific section in the platform that unites information of all the stakeholders, as I mentioned, that work on MIL issues in the country. This section is called Hub. We call it Hub, MIL Hub. And the visitors can find any information on various governmental and non-governmental international organizations that work on MIL, their resources and links of their website, all in one space. This is the huge step in establishing and building a networking system on media literacy in the country. As I mentioned above, Communications Commission is an independent organization that has function of media literacy development in the country, and also it has the role of coordination between all various organizations that work on MIL in the country, and also give them equal opportunities for cooperation. Within the same, this year, Communications Commission started to build strong partnership with various civil society institutions, private sector, different sectors of education like universities, organizations that work on ethnic minority issues, because the regions that are tightly populated with ethnic minorities have more challenges and needs for media literacy, and they need our support. We're planning to enhance the networking platform of conferences, like a mandatory event to be held at least twice a year. We will have second conference in November 2020, and are planning to invite all the stakeholders, governmental, non-governmental, educational, international, etc., media sector, of course, all the organizations, and start discussions with them so that all have equal opportunities from ComCom to take part and to be part of such discussions. Communications Commission will host, lead, and organize their conferences, these conferences at least twice a year, as I mentioned. Thus, we are launching a system that will make sense of media literacy network, bring together organizations and individuals with expertise in media literacy, and work towards a shared goal. I would say this is shared goal of improving media literacy knowledge and skills for various target audiences. And finally, I would like to mention that Communications Commission always takes part in these roundtables, but for me, this is the first media literacy roundtable within the role of department head, and I believe that we will continue to have very strong partnership and cooperation. We're very open to share our experience and also have your support. This roundtable is an example for the strong partnership, networking, and again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Natia. And that was another summary of the huge amount of work that's been going on. And you're very welcome. This is your first meeting, so you're very welcome. And I can see on the side where the chat is that there's lots of comments and questions. And we're just going to get, in a moment, we're going to move over to Maria, who has been keeping an eye on the chat, and she's going to ask some questions now. But I just want to say a big thank you to Martina, Leah, and Natia there for some excellent summaries of phenomenal work going on. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, and also a huge thanks from me to everyone who's spoken just now. Incredibly interesting. Lots of, if I can just say a couple of words on some of the really key themes that have come out from me from those first interventions, and then I'll of course pass on to the questions from our participants. One of the really just fantastic to hear how much all of these initiatives have borrowed. Sometimes you use the word copying, sometimes you use the word borrowing, but actually I think it's sort of almost inspirational, right, from the organizations in other countries that have and the experts that have gone before, that have done this stuff before. So for me, that process of learning from others and and passing on that knowledge is one of the most sort of marked aspects of what you guys have all been saying. Also, incredibly useful practical suggestions and practical advice, I think, for everyone, and not just, by the way, for people who are thinking about starting a network. You know, Ofcom created a network in the UK a year ago, and I think a huge amount of that of what's been said today is still, you know, ahead of us, and still really, really useful for us to think about. That I think in terms of questions, there's some really, really excellent and already been a bit of discussion and information posted in the chat. Please do take a look at that, and I think we'll try to gather that up as well, and provide some sort of output note of this session, which sort of incorporates anything that we're not able to deal with today. But moving on to your questions, I think maybe there's been a lot of discussion in the chat and questions about mapping, and I think the mapping question divides into two. One is mapping of the media literacy, or understanding the levels of media literacy within a country, as in, you know, trying to find out where the problems might be. And then the other is about mapping of organizations' activity and initiatives which deliver media literacy education. And I just, so I think it would be useful perhaps to go to Martina Wagner first, to just, maybe you could just talk through some of the things that you've been posting in the chat of exactly how you went about mapping the, I think it's more focused on the organizations, if I've understood that correctly. Perhaps just if you could talk through a little bit of the practical aspects of how you did it. Did you use questionnaires? How did you decide who to contact, and so on? Martina, if I can.
Yes. I see all these questions. When I carried out the Swedish Media Council, together with Authority for the Press, National Press and Broadcasting Authority, mapped initiatives and stakeholders. So it was not about levels of media and information literacy. And we did it by a survey. This was 2017 and 2018. But as I was posting here in the chat, is that now in this year of construction for this more solid media and information literacy work in Sweden, we are developing methodologically this mapping, because it was not easy carrying it out. Because how do you map something that has not one single definition? Who is an actor in this field? We all know that this is cross-sector. We have our different ways of looking at these issues. So we've had huge, very many challenges in doing this mapping. But right now, where we are, I think the most important thing is to create this common, a snapshot of where are we now regarding what is being done, by who, what are the target groups, what do we have, a snapshot 2020 on what kind of initiatives there are around. And this is mainly for the stakeholders in this network to be able to coordinate and canalize our own work.
Thank you very much. And a lot of that does sound really, really familiar, actually, from some of the other types of mapping exercises that I've heard, and also the challenges, very, very familiar to me as well. Andy, I don't know whether there was anything else that you wanted to add on the question of mapping. You mentioned just now that you've done several iterations, and that you've got a map of actually available for others to look at. Just wondered if there was anything in particular that you wanted to reflect on in terms of what's useful advice for those wanting to undertake mapping, from the start.
Well, there were some iterations. It was started right before the Knowledge Center started, and then we did 2 iterations of mapping organizations and mapping the field ourselves. And now we just see it as a kind of ongoing mechanism in this online map, because there are a few. It is interesting because in the beginning you start to see what organizations on a central level are working on it, and it's interesting to see the network forming. It's also interesting because you can, if you divide it into sectors, you can see like in which sectors are no organizations actually saying that they're working on media literacy. And for us, there's a big question there on youth care facilities and care facilities for people with a disability. These are really sectors that aren't working on these aspects yet, and that's for us a clear void in policy. So you can see things like that. You can also see things like if you ask questions on are you working on policies and stuff, and then we see that there are almost no research institutions or no policy levels working on digital inclusion in Flanders, which we already knew, but we see then confirmed in this mapping. But there's also a few problems with it, and it's mainly that it's a self-reporting most of the time. So you don't really know what organizations are not reporting that they are doing media literacy, but are doing it. And on the other hand, some are reporting that they are doing it, but maybe aren't really doing very interesting things yet. That's one thing. The other thing is it takes quite some time and quite some budget. So if we really focused on that, kept focusing on that, there would be a lot of budget, especially if we had the mapping of the levels of media literacy in the public as well, which we do. We do every 2 years, we do a mapping of digital media use and possessions, and with children from 6 to 18, and we do a questionnaire every 2 years for parents on their children's media, on their worries and stuff like that. But we don't do the general public. There we just try to work together with questionnaires and monitors that are already being set up by the government or by research institution, which is difficult, but I think that's the only way for us to keep it financially feasible. But then back to the organizations, you have the self-reporting. It's also in the beginning, it's interesting because mostly organizations who are really doing something on it are reporting on it. But then you come to questions like, okay, normally all schools should be doing something on it, and they probably are. Is it our intention to get all schools in our mapping? Then it starts to become this kind of a big monster. And there you just, I think, reach a few boundaries of what a mapping exercise like that can actually do. So that's why we're doing less mapping and doing more, trying to work together more with people.
I was just saying that it was not surprising, of course, that you've moved on from mapping to some extent because you're a more mature organisation. But I guess it's probably something that is still of significant relevance for those who are just starting out. Just staying with you, Andy, for one brief second, because there are a couple of other questions that were directed at you, and I wanted also to move us on to talking about definitions and the formalities of role and designation of organisations as well. But the first question is, and this is relevant also, I think, to what you were saying about the mapping. Did you use a very clear and precise, predetermined definition of what media literacy is when you began your work?
I think for us it was yes. Well, clear and precise, that's very difficult to say. When is it clear? There is a definition. It's in a concept paper by the government, by the Minister of Education and Minister of Media, that was put forward, concept paper on media literacy. It was the second official document on media literacy by the government. The first was putting it into the attainment goals of secondary education in 2010, and then came the concept paper in 2012. But it was really a copy of the definition that was used in the Netherlands with the Council of Culture there in 2008. So and it's just a paragraph. It mainly says media literacy is the competence to be able to use media in an active, critical, conscious, and creative way to participate in society. And there it kind of stops. But we developed that into a competence model, into curriculum and stuff like that over the years. But in the start, that was mainly what it. That definition was just the thing that we tried to work on. And then we worked with a lot of people, experts in the field, who said, for us, that means that, and it's these sectors that are interesting, and it's that kind of work and stuff like that. So that made it more concrete.
Thank you. Which brings me on, I think, to another question that has been asked by a few in the comments, especially early on, which was around the importance of an official designation for a media literacy organization or indeed a network, a kind of a status, either within law or within some kind of policy framework. I wonder, I don't know if any of the participants want to come in on this, whether or not basically a formal status is a good thing or a bad thing, and whether or not actually more can be achieved informally. Maybe Natia, maybe from your experience of having a more formal designation, but anyone who wants to come in on that. Leah, go on. Leah, please go ahead.
I think it would be useful because few years ago we discussed it on an EPRA meeting, and my position was that it would be very useful. Legal mandate. It's not necessary. We have done what I already explained and presented without any legal mandate, but it would be very useful in terms of it would provide for argumentation to have departments such as we have now, to have human resources, but also to have financial resources. And it would give you some kind of a credibility among other state institutions in this area. So I think it would be useful to have an assignation.
The same, yeah, absolutely, yes. It is very useful, and it will be very needed. It is needed, I think so, and yeah, it's good. It will be good for credibility. Definitely, I agree.
Maria, if I can come in there, just very
please.
I would agree with the comments that have been made from my work and different organizations that I've worked with and the work that I've done in the area. It's very clear that having some organization in a leadership role whose job it is to lead in this area is very important. I think it's also useful maybe to differentiate between leadership and ownership. And I think certainly having one organization or a number of organizations that have a responsibility, a statutory responsibility in the area, it does help move things along. And yes, it does. All the comments about credibility, but also it's about funding as well. And if there's a statutory duty given to somebody, then one would hope that there's allocated funding as well.
Thank you very much. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, but I wonder if I can, Martina, squeeze in one more general question to the panel, which is about engagement. Now, I think we will have further meetings where we can talk, I think, in much more detail about sustaining engagement and about, how to encourage and to really get the level of participation from network members that drives then the network. I really want to focus on that in a subsequent meeting if we can. But I think just from a launching and the starting and the getting a network going, I was just wondering if any and all of the panelists today could give us in 20 seconds their main piece of advice for how to kind of get that early commitment by network members to participation in this sort of relatively unknown project at that point. I don't know who wants to come in first. Maybe Martina, Wagner, given that you've got a relatively small and early network going at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think the engagement, we started off in our consultations to sort of see each stakeholder in this big jigsaw puzzle of stakeholders, and sort of where does each actor fit in this puzzle. And we asked very openly, how could you benefit from this mission of the Swedish Media Council on doing this for enhancing media and information literacy? Where do you fit in? So I think the engagement could come. We started off, this was bilateral meetings. So I think engagement was sort of started off there with involving each member. And also we have to remember when starting off, our membership is by invite this first year, which of course is a bit different from what Andy was talking about.
So basically giving them a bit of love and making them feel special.
Yeah.
Would any of the others like to comment on this question of involving members at early stages, or I will hand back over to Martina to wrap up?
I think that that one of the factors, and that's something that Martina already said as well, is the funding. It's a key aspect, but also a very big pitfall. For us, it's been very interesting and also very enticing to get partners aboard, that there was funding and that we had some budget that we could use to either get them to do stuff, or it was also it attracted also a lot of people and organizations that are looking for funding, but not necessarily for collaboration and for things that you actually want to happen in a broader sense. And when not everybody can get funding or can get financial aid to collaborate with you, then there's also a bit of a disappointment, of course. So it's a two-way street there. But for us, keeping in our budget, keeping staff costs on a 60 to 65%, and keeping enough working budget besides that, means that we can actually get other organizations and big organizations more easily aboard, because we can bring in some finances into the project that we are suggesting to them as well. And it always makes it more interesting.
Thank you very much. Really, really interesting comments in the chat as well. We're sort of running out of time, unfortunately, but as I said, I think we will try and kind of communicate all of those to members in some way, or return to some of these topics in our next roundtable. Huge amounts left to talk about. I think we haven't really bottomed out on mapping, and I'm really interested also in these questions of funding. So I'm going to hand over back to Martina to summarize and to close today's session. And then if I can just if you can indulge me by staying on for another few minutes, just so we can make some plans for our next session as well at the end. Martina.
Thanks very much, Maria. Just to quickly pick up, yes, there's lots more we can discuss in relation to funding and mapping and topics like that, but I think a lot of that will be drawn out hopefully in the next session. So the next session will focus on more the structure and the activities and the operations of the different networks. So those are topics I do believe we'll hear more about. Again, they're not going away anywhere. And just to come back to, there was, I think Sally was asking a question about measuring impact. And it's not a naive question at all, Sally. And Patrick picked up on that point in the comments as well, because media literacy is so dynamic. It is it's trying to hit a constantly moving target when you're trying to measure impact, or measure I don't like to use that term, levels of media literacy. But that's what we're going to dedicate session 3 to, measurement, because we really want to try and get some and concrete examples of how different people have measured the impact or the reach or whatever it is they're measuring in terms of media literacy activities as well. So great questions, great points, and we're going to come to some of those in the next two sessions. In terms of this session, it was about establishing networks, getting them set up, getting them off the ground. I think we've had 3 excellent contributions from 3 relatively new networks who are doing amazing work. And obviously thanks to Andy as well for his terrific insight. And just to come back to some of the kind of the top tips, the purpose, understanding what the purpose and the vision of your network is, I think is critical. Who's going to be included and why, and maybe more importantly is who's going to benefit and why and how. And that leads on then to the question of impact as well. So thinking about what kind of impact the network should have or is desirable and how that can be measured. Because I think having some kind of baseline at the start by which to measure your progress against is terrific. And mapping, with lots of discussion around mapping as well, and different kinds of mapping. So yes, there's mapping of media, of organizations and stakeholders. There's mapping of media literacy activities, and then there's mapping of media literacy among the general public or among society in itself. So there's lots of different ways of looking at mapping, and again, it's very dynamic, it's evolving all the time. So there were lots of collaboration. Obviously, if we're talking about networks, collaboration is a key theme. And certainly, I think the point was well made about the importance of developing those human connections and investing in building the relationships and not underestimating the time and effort that's required to kind of bring people together and developing that cohesion and that. There's probably lots of other points that I've missed on this, but I'm conscious of time as well. So I'm just going to give my final heartfelt thanks to all the speakers and to all the participants, and over to Maria to formally close the session.
Thank you very much. My huge thanks to Martina, of course, and to all of our speakers today, and indeed to all of you for the really active debates and discussions that are taking place over in the chat. I think this suggests to me a couple of things. One, that we definitely have more than enough to talk about in the forthcoming sessions that we have planned. The other is that we may potentially extend that by maybe 20 minutes or so, and the other is that the other is the point that I wanted to raise at the start of this meeting, which is that we are currently looking at holding our next session in exactly 2 weeks' time. You will see that in the WebEx functionality, Emmanuel Maché has just posted a poll to ask about your availability on the 25th and a possible postponement to, it's actually Monday the 28th of September. I know this because Sunday the 27th of September is my birthday. So if you would like to join us instead on the day after my impending yet another birthday, you're very, very welcome to do that too. If you could just respond to the poll and let us know your availability, I'd be very, very grateful, and so would our secretariat. Yeah, the countdown clock is quite tense there in the corner, so do please respond. And similarly, Martina's just saying, if you want to participate more actively in and be a speaker in any of our forthcoming sessions, then please do. Having said that, if we can try and extend the time a little bit, I think it is also perfectly possible for people to speak and to take the floor should they want to. If you just indicate that in the chat, I can always in future sessions hand the floor over to you. I think that's probably enough, and I'm happy to wrap up. Thank you again so much for all of our guests, who I hope will become our much closer partners in the future, and of course to all members of EPRA. Really fantastic to see you all, or at least to hear from you. I've missed you all very much, and really hope to see you in person someday very soon. I'm just going to let Emmanuel say any final words in case there's anything that we need to say. Thank you so much from me.
Just nothing to say more. I was just delighted to see that it went well, and I'm looking forward to the continuation. So if you please, just the one that have not voted on a poll, wait a little more. and then provide you answers so that you will be able to see whether we need to change or not the time of the meeting. I will say as well, we'll share some documents. At least we have a presentation, more detail about the media literacy network in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we will make this presentation to the participant shortly. Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.